Tonight, Rachel Notley's botched attempt to bully us failed, but I'll tell you who else is already lining up to censor us. It's February 18th, and you're watching The Ezra Levant Show. Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government about why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
This week was exciting. It was our 1-year anniversary from when we started TheRebel.media. Oh, and also the government of Alberta banned our reporters from all government property using armed sheriffs and Department of Justice lawyers. Here's the sheriff.
For today's event? We already spoke to Darcy Henton. He said there should be no problem to come in. What? Sorry, why is that? Sorry, why?
Now, I don't really blame him. He's just following orders, but surely there comes a point where a sheriff says to himself, I'm in Canada, not in Venezuela. I don't actually have to follow political orders to throw journalists out of a legislature. And here's the letter from Jason Fung, the Department of Justice lawyer, who says not only are our reporters banned from any public building in Alberta, but anyone merely connected to us is banned also. What does that even mean, connected? Like my brother-in-law or my barber? Are they banned too? I mean, again, I don't blame the government lawyer like the sheriff. He's just following orders. Orders from Rachel Notley. It was cute when Rachel Notley was elected and everyone suddenly noticed that her wristwatch had a picture of Che Guevara on it, the Cuban murderer. And it was funny when an actual Hugo Chavez communist was discovered in her caucus. This guy, Rod Loyola.
Long live Hugo Chavez. Long live the values that he stood for. Compañero Presidente Hugo Chavez.
Seriously, he is now a Rachel Notley MLA. You know, I don't often call people communist as an insult because I think communists are so terrible, you don't want to dull the meaning of the word by calling just anyone you don't like a communist. To me, it's like overusing the word Nazi. But what do you call it when the Alberta NDP is literally run by people who adore Che Guevara and praise Hugo Chavez, and then they crack down on journalists, literally sending armed security to kick them out of public buildings, just a little bit like Hugo Chavez did. Oh, look, Notley and her NDP destroyers really believe this stuff. They are radicals and wreckers. That's her on the far left there. Look, they tear down, they don't build up. The video clip I love and hate the most about the NDP is this next one by Dave Egan, their wacko cabinet minister, chanting against the oil sands like a cheerleader learning a new cheer. Remember this?
Doing the right thing means that we have no new approvals for tar sand projects, and we start to invest money into a renewable energy and into a sustainable economy. Yeah. No new approvals. No new approvals. No new approvals. No new approvals.
Yeah, are you really shocked that these kind of people think they can ban journalists from public buildings, who think that the NDP now owns the province and all its buildings and all its institutions? Yeah, me neither. So they finally blinked yesterday, not because they thought they had a bad idea, but because they realized they couldn't get away with it. They did not apologize yesterday. The premier actually said nothing. She canceled her public appearance. She's hiding from journalists. She didn't apologize. She had her hapless spin doctor, Cheryl Oates, send out an email calling the whole gambit, quote, a mistake, as in not a moral mistake that they need to apologize for, but a tactical mistake because they miscalculated what they could get away with. Look, they're not done censoring. As I mentioned yesterday, the NDP have hired a former journalist, Heather Boyd, to, quote, consult and give us recommendations on what the government's media policy should be, unquote. Apparently, she's been asked to report back in 2 to 3 weeks. Oh, and she's being paid $9,500 for that. Whoa, who said times were tough in Alberta? Sure, 100,000 oilmen have lost their jobs. Unemployment is skyrocketing. Employment insurance claims are up more than 100%. Wages are falling, but come in to bail out Rachel Notley from her screw-ups, and you can make 10 grand in 2 weeks. That's on pace for $250,000 a year. That's good times if you're a friend of the NDP. But hang on, how is it any different for Rachel Notley to ban the Rebel directly through the use of armed sheriffs or by having a governmental lawyer write an official "you're banned" letter? How is that any different than paying $9,500 to a crony who then makes a recommendation to Notley to do the same thing or a version thereof? I'm sure Heather Boyd is a very nice lady. She must be if she's getting paid $9,500 for 2 weeks' work. I mean, that's almost supermodel money. She sounds amazing, but it's one thing for her to offer her own opinions about journalism, but if those opinions are then implemented using the power of the government, it's no different than if Notley herself cooked up the scheme. It's illegal. Notley censored us because of her vendetta against us. She can't now censor us by using her supermodel hired guns report as the excuse, pretending that somehow relieves her of her constitutional obligations to respect freedom of the press. Right now in the NDP, there are two competing emotions going on. One is vengeance. They have been humiliated the past few days. We've proven that you can stand up to Rachel Notley and win. You can make her blink. That has not happened before, and it's surely a precedent she hates. She doesn't just look like a fool today and a bully, she looks beatable. Her edicts don't look inevitable anymore. So that's instinct number one in the NDP, vengeance. But the other instinct is self-preservation. If she were to come back again now, using Heather Boyd as a fig leaf, saying, oh, well, we're still going to kick out the Rebel and other conservatives we hate, but it's not because we hate them, it's because our hired gun supermodel came up with an excuse. If Notley said that, she'd be hit again in the national media, and we would proceed with our lawsuit. So which is it, vengeance or self-preservation? Which emotion will the NDP follow? Well, part of me thinks they'll go for vengeance. And listen to Rachel Notley laugh and mock at the last people who tried to defy her, Alberta farmers. Remember this, laughing about Bill 6, her Farm Unionization Act.
And then there was my favorite bill. But you know, it really is. And then there was Bill 6. Now,
laughing and mocking the misery of others. Because Notley is a radical. She's not a liberal. There is a difference. A radical wants to tear things down to their roots. A liberal believes in compromise and differences of opinion and fair processes. That ain't Notley. Her hero isn't Wilfrid Laurier, it's Che Guevara. But look, on the other hand, Notley has already plummeted to 33% in the latest opinion poll by Angus Reid. And that poll was taken one day before this latest scandal blew up. Does she really want to go lower? So that's the self-preservation side? Well, there's a third way forward. She can get her vengeance on us, and she can keep her hands clean by getting other journalists to do her dirty work for her. Here's what I mean. You know what a profession is, right? It's a regulated industry like medicine or law or engineering. I mean, you can't just one day say, you're a medical doctor and just start doing surgeries. You need to be admitted to something called the College of Physicians and Surgeons. It's a fancy name for the Doctors Club, an elite cartel that decides who can or can't practice medicine, that has exams and standards, that has disciplinary powers, even the power to strip a doctor of his license. Same in engineering, and it makes sense. I mean, you don't want quacks doing surgery or designing skyscrapers, right? But journalism is not a real profession. There is no secret skill or knowledge. Anyone can comment on the day's events, and indeed, everyone does. It's always been this way, except until recently, a personal diary or a momentary reflection on the world was only shared to those immediately around you, or in a letter maybe. But now you can tweet it or Facebook it to the world. Think of how much official journalism is really just ordinary people catching a moment on their cell phone video cameras these days. Almost all immediate journalism from a crisis, a terrorist attack, a tornado, a plane crash, that's all amateur journalism. So it's not a profession. Journalists are people who do journalism. It's got nothing to do with the approval of a third party. But what if Heather Boyd, who has received secret instructions from the NDP government that have not been released publicly, and I doubt ever will be, what if Heather Boyd has been told to come up with the third way here? To get Notley's vengeance against conservative journalists like us, but to keep the government out of court and out of scandal. What if Heather Boyd actually earns her $9,500 for 2 weeks of work by suggesting that a committee of journalists now sets standards, like the College of Physicians and Surgeons? That maybe there's entry fees now, maybe dues, perhaps exams, a complaints system with hearings and disbarments for journalists who don't live up to certain standards. So what if Heather Boyd gives Rachel Notley what Notley's really looking for, which is plausible deniability, to turn government events over to a cartel of elites to do her dirty work for her? So now it's not an armed sheriff turning away our reporter Sheila Gunn-Reid at the legislature door. Now it's a panel of official journalists who have been deputized as the gatekeepers, like the College of Physicians and Surgeons has been delegated the power to approve or disapprove of any doctors. Oh, no. It wasn't Rachel Notley who did it. No, it was respectable, reputable, moderate, long-serving journalists like the unionized reporters at the CBC who have a very particular point of view. Or maybe it's not even about a point of view. Maybe they would just keep the cartel small for a more natural reason, to eliminate competition, especially from journalistic startups like us. Imagine Rachel Notley saying, well, we would really love to let Sheila Gunn-Reid in. Oh, we would. But the media professionals group said no, and you know how much we respect journalists, so obviously we won't meddle in their professional affairs. Sorry, Sheila, we're not kicking you out. Real journalists are. You think that's crazy? Well, of course it's crazy, but it is being suggested right now by censors on the right and on the left. Here, take a look at this former Alberta PC cabinet minister, Thomas Lukaszuk, who tweeted, like Law Society and colleges of physicians, media must be independent and self-regulated. Government has no jurisdiction over the Fifth Estate. Hey, Thomas, Fifth Estate is the name of a TV show. The media is referred to as the Fourth Estate, but put aside that, the point is you're promoting the trick here. It's not censorship if a media cartel does it. It's not illegal regulation if handpicked media elites do it. Looks bad if Notley or her armed sheriffs kick out Sheila. Looks good when the CBC's employees union gets to do it. Well, Thomas Lukaszuk is a PC. Here's a liberal, Bruce Anderson. You'll remember Bruce Anderson from our last expose. He's the liberal pundit for years on the CBC, and his daughter is Justin Trudeau's communications director, Kate Purchase. And as you can see in this footage here, Peter Mansbridge presided over his daughter's luxury wedding in Italy. So Bruce Anderson is in tight with the CBC and Peter Mansbridge, and obviously with Justin Trudeau, his own daughter, runs Trudeau's entire media operation. So here's what Bruce Anderson has been saying in direct response to the Notley ban of Sheila. He said, quote, "I see no better alternative than professional journalists accepting awkward responsibility to establish fair parameters in disrupted market." So a cartel, a professional body that establishes parameters. That means drawing a line, who's in, who's out. And he warmed to the idea, especially after Notley backed down. He said, the right call to back down, defining journalism, probably useful to do in today's marketplace, but best done by journalists. So not in the marketplace of ideas, not by you, the news consumer, but by journalists like him. Now, he's a lobbyist, he's a party hack, he's an industry insider, he's a deal maker, he's an ad salesman. But for years, he pretended to be a journalist on the CBC, and the Globe and Mail still runs him as a journalist, but it's us here at The Rebel who aren't real journalists, yeah. But he's calling for a cartel. He's calling for limits, for parameters, obviously drafted by people like him. Maybe his buddy Peter Mansbridge, who knows? Bruce Cameron's excited by this. He's up for the job. If Rachel Notley won't censor us, he will. He's champing at the bit. Forget about logical questions like, if journalists vet other journalists, well, who gets to vet the first journalist to do the vetting? Can I set up a club to vet my enemies and competitors out of business? Or can only liberal journalists and lobbyists do that? Here's the Toronto Star, Alex Boutillier, checking with Maclean's magazine, another Toronto magazine, to see if The Rebel was officially accredited by the Alberta Press Gallery. See, to him, that's important that we have Maclean's magazine's approval to do our journalism. I won't go on, but there's lots of examples. Do you see now why I called the news of Rachel Notley backing down a partial victory? Because she's hired a senior establishment journalist to look into media regulation. And there's no shortage of journalists who would love to serve on such an important professional panel and have the power to say whether we at The Rebel are or aren't worthy of the name journalist. Yeah, I don't think Notley's going to bring back the ban herself. But I think looking at all these eager journalists ready to play that role for her, I think she's going to be pretty tempted to just delegate the censorship to them. Don't you think? Stay with us.
I love Alberta. I've lived here my whole life and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of our free market, pro-business, low-tax, do-it-yourself attitude. And now, I'm watching my province get destroyed. We've all had hints of the NDP's radical views in the past, but no one actually thought they'd ever run this province. Not even them. And now they are. And the worst is yet to come. I give my sad forecast for Alberta in my new ebook, The Destroyers, Rachel Notley and the NDP's War on Alberta.
Well, people are saying it was Rachel Notley's biggest disaster in her term as premier, the way she tried to censor us. And in some moral way, I suppose that's true. But look, there is a larger, permanent, more real disaster in Alberta, the economic disaster, 100,000 people losing their jobs. And that's an enormous statistic, but each one of those is a family with a mortgage and food to grocery bills. It's a real disaster. So in the face of this disaster, well, the Notley NDP are doubling down and making it worse. Here in studio to join us to talk about it is my friend Paige MacPherson, Alberta boss of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Nice to see you here in town.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here.
Well, we love talking to you via Skype from Calgary. You are one of the handful of people fighting hard on the ground to try and rein in that disaster. So much unemployment and so much private sector investment driven out. Tell me about the goofy Band-Aid solution Notley's trying to put on the problem that'll probably make it worse.
Sure. So ironically, she's actually recycling this idea from PC governments of yesteryear. It's this whole economic diversification push, saying that, you know what, we do get a lot of oil out of the ground in Alberta. Let's do some other stuff with that oil in the province. Now, of course, if there is a market case to, let's say, refine or upgrade bitumen in Alberta, then companies would already be doing that. In a lot of cases, companies already are. But the Alberta government has said, okay, we're going to flush some money into this. It's essentially corporate welfare. They've established a $500 million subsidy for petrochemical companies to start investing in that area and create jobs there. And it's very misleading, you know, when you look at these economic diversification pushes as to how economically viable they actually are. Are they actually this miracle that governments bill them as? No, but also Alberta has already lost billions and billions of dollars on these pushes in the past. It's really not a great idea to recycle.
Well, now let's talk about those scandals in the past. You brought some statistics with you. Tell me, and you mentioned, I mean, listen, the Tories ran Alberta for 4 decades. They tried this economic diversification. That's code word for we think we're better business people than business people, so we want to play with monopoly money that's real taxpayers. Give me a couple of examples.
Sure. So this has been going on since the 1970s, and it's estimated that between 1973 and 1993, Alberta lost $2.2 billion on these economic diversification projects in total. We have 2 really glaring examples of this. One was the Lloydminster Upgrader. That was sort of a joint project between the Saskatchewan government, the Alberta government, and Ottawa, the feds, as well as as Husky Energy. Alberta ended up spending $404 million taxpayer dollars on that project, including cost overruns and capital costs. And then they ended up selling their stake in 1994 for only $32 million. So we lost hundreds of millions of dollars there. The other great example is the Northwest Sturgeon Upgrader, another very similar push that the government tried to put money into this industry, and taxpayers ended up on the hook for $26 billion for this project. Neither of them ended up being these economic miracles that they were billed as. Neither of them ended up creating all of these jobs without a risk for taxpayers. They both started out as these so-called low cost, low risk opportunities, and they ended up having major cost overruns and leaving taxpayers with the bill.
I mean, I'm an Alberta boy, so I know of other goofy examples I'm going to give you in a minute. But the obvious thing is petroleum industry, petrochemical industry, they're pretty close together to begin with. It's already happening. Alberta is the petrochemical center of Canada. Refineries, upgraders, those things would happen, are happening, were happening on their own if there was a business case for it. It's sort of comedy that a government that has declared war on fossil fuels would now say, oh, now that we've driven $20 billion worth of investment out of the province, now that we've hiked carbon taxes, like that we've scared everybody, let's throw $500 million around to try and get some of these petrochemical companies back. Like, it's so weird.
It is weird.
It's not even diversification. When I was growing up in Alberta, we had MagCan, a magnesium company. There was the Swan Hills, toxic waste incinerator. There was Novatel cell phones. So this diversification, I mean, it can be really goofy. I mean, we all know about sprung greenhouses. So, I mean, I know Alberta well enough, and oil men and oil finance. And the left would say they're greedy. The right would say they're always looking for a way to make a return on investment. Same thing. If you've got hundreds of smart MBA entrepreneurs looking to invest money, how does the NDP think they're going to find this one golden economic opportunity that all these smart, greedy capitalist investors are missing?
Right.
Like, there's no shortage of people looking to make a buck.
Yeah.
I don't think that, in fact, I do know, I've gone through the entire list of MLAs in the NDP government. Only 2 of them have private sector entrepreneurial experience, and neither of them are in cabinet. It's crazy to me to think that Rachel Notley and her union boss friends think they can play entrepreneur. They're not.
Well, yeah, I mean, so to quote Ralph Klein, government shouldn't be in the business of business. And that he was speaking from Alberta's history here. I mean, you gave some crazy examples. There's also, Alberta got into the meat packing business.
Oh, right, I forgot
the airline business.
I mean, that's true.
They lost, by the 1990s, $2.3 billion on those wacky economic diversification projects. But you're absolutely right. When it comes to oil and gas, petroleum, petrochemicals, it's really not diversifying at all. And not to mention, Alberta already does really well in the petrochemicals industry. We already do refine a lot of the bitumen in our province before we export it. I've seen the number about half, according to the Financial Post. And I don't know, I do find it strange as well that, bitumen, it's got this environmentalist, I think, slant to it, because there's no real other export where you would say, okay, we need to have a finished project, a product before we export it.
Yeah, it would be like Saskatchewan saying, stop exporting wheat, let's only export bagels and loaves of bread.
Exactly. It's kind of a weird thing, and that's where the environmentalism
NDPers,
comes in.
They've never run a business in their life. They don't know what they're doing. To me, the largest irony here, there's so many levels. Socialists playing capitalist. Petrochemicals being a diversification of the petroleum industry. The industry's already there. There's so many weirdnesses, but the number one to me is everything you've described in the petrochemical industry is carbon intensive.
Right.
That's what the word petro comes from, rock, So they've scared away tens of billions of dollars of investment. You have oil and gas companies pulling out and reinvesting in safer places like Iraq and Nigeria. And then after it's all said and done, oh, we've got a $500 million. Can someone come back, please? You didn't need to give away $500 million. You could have stopped the $20 billion from stampeding out the province because of your carbon taxes. It's so weird. And there's no grown-ups in there to tell them stop, is there? Is there anyone you can detect in the entire Alberta government who's not an activist, an extremist, a radical, a lobbyist, a mercenary brought in from Toronto or Vancouver? Like, they really don't have like a gray-haired, older statesman type who would say, you know what? I've seen this before, let me wait. Like, there's no grown up there, is there?
It's a young government. I'm sure that a lot of the people who are in the bureaucracy are the same people, but the reality is that, you know, even when there were those old guys in government, they were still really bad at business.
Yeah.
Government isn't good at being in the business.
I don't even mean in government, I mean in the NDP party. Like, just someone to say, you guys are, you know, you're reading your Noam Chomsky and your Karl Marx, and those aren't training manuals on how to run anything. Those are crazy, radical textbooks for permanent students. You're not students. Now, a lot of them were students right before they became MLAs. Like, there's just no one in the government who can say, this is too crazy, you've got to stop. There's just, I haven't found such a person.
Well, certainly nobody's speaking, you know, from experience on these files saying this hasn't worked, why we're trying it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's, you know, there are people outside of government, though, who are saying, you know, these are bad ideas.
Yeah.
A lot of the numbers that I've thrown at you are from the University of Calgary.
Yeah.
They also tend to talk about why these kinds of corporate welfare, economic diversification, forced subsidies are a bad idea. We have to remember that, you know, when you're talking about these subsidies, you're taxing people, like the carbon tax that you mentioned, increased income tax, corporate tax. These are, you know, distortionary taxes. They have bad impacts on the economy. So when you're taking taxes that are having a negative impact on the economy, and then you're giving it out in subsidies, and you're talking about all the great things that a subsidy could, in theory, do, you're not talking about that bad side of it.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of these studies say you're just really shifting employment from one place to another when it comes to these government-forced subsidies. It really is just a terrible idea. And I think the important thing here is, you know, maybe this $500 million won't be an absolute disaster, but this is the first, I think, in a long line of these subsidies that the NDP is going to pursue here in Alberta, based on their platform and based on what they've said. So that's a lot of money.
I mean, if you're a private sector investor and you were contemplating a $10 billion investment, and the NDP says, well, we'll give you a few $100 million, is that going to outweigh your terror of this government and what they'll do to you next? I don't think so. The final thought I have, and I was saying it to you just before the cameras came on, is one of the big players in North American petrochemical industries is the private company called Koch Industries, run by the Koch brothers. Wouldn't it be ironic if these wacko Noam Chomsky, Karl Marx, conspiracy theorist NDPers wound up subsidizing Koch Industries, because who else is going to take a petrochemical grant? That would be a classic moment, and it would make me laugh. It's not worth $500 million to make me laugh, but it would make me laugh. Paige, you're the best. You keep fighting out there in Alberta. It's nice to see you here in person.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're so welcome. Stay with us, folks. After the break, after the break, we've got Simon Kent from London, England. He's got a great story. Come back for that.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know TheRebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to TheRebel.media/store to find out more.
Ontario residents are being hosed on electricity prices. The latest Auditor General's report says we've been overcharged by $37 billion over the last several years. That works out to nearly $2,800 for every man, woman, and child. Why? Mismanagement and bad policy choices from the Ontario Liberals. It's going to cost us billions more in coming years. Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli won't take responsibility. He's lashing out. It's time for Bob to go. If you agree, go to firebob.ca. That's firebob.ca and make your voice heard.
Welcome back to the program. Well, one of the things that we're noticing in the great debate about mass Muslim migration to the West is how media censorship is creeping in, either directly from the government orders or through Twitter and Facebook, censoring anti-migrant commentary by banning or blocking or suspending posts. We've talked about that several times. It was an interesting case in Germany where one of the senior presenters from one of the largest state-run TV companies, ZDF, said for sure they were taking orders from the government to be pro-migrant and to downplay the news of crime. We all know that, for example, the Cologne mass sexual assaults were covered up by both politicians, the police, and the press for days. But here's an interesting story out of Germany about an attempt by the government to muzzle a newspaper, and the newspaper fought back. Joining us now via Skype from London, the managing editor of Breitbart London, our friend Simon Kent, with this twist in the tale. Simon, great to see you again.
Good to see you too, Ezra.
Now, as I just mentioned, the censorship that we've seen for months has been to tamp down any anti-migrant commentary, even to censor actual hard news, and to promote a sunny picture of Muslim migration. That's been the media press compact. But you have a story now in Breitbart London of a case where a politician said to the media, "Don't be so pro-refugee," and the media fought back. Tell me the facts.
Well, the magazine is Bild magazine in Germany, mass market, mass circulation publication. This week it ran a story on the front saying Germany should welcome more migrants. Germany should open the door. I think they used the word the free world should be welcomed to Germany. Now, one of Angela Merkel's Christian Democrat allies turned around and said, well, hold on, that's not the official government policy anymore. We're trying to slow this down, so you mustn't say that. And I don't agree at all with the sentiment expressed by Bild. And let's remember also, Bild had to apologise for not reporting on those Cologne sexual assaults on New Year's Eve. But Bild fought back and said, well, we'll decide what we publish, how we package it, and what our narrative is. We don't need the government to do this. And it's now evolved into a Facebook Twitter war between this ally of Angela Merkel's in the parliament and the editor of the Bild, and he's not backing down. And as I said, I don't agree with what he's saying, but it's nice to see the German media, for a change, standing up to the government and maybe even thinking for itself. Because for so long, German journalists and reporters have been stenographers going to press conferences rather than being sentient human beings and asking questions and really writing the story as it is and telling the truth, Ezra.
Yeah, well, we just had our big free speech fight here in the province of Alberta with the government not trying to tell us what to say. They knew we wouldn't do that, but just saying you're a non-person, non-journalist, you're banned if you don't follow the line. But what's interesting about Germany is it's such a pro-migrant establishment. Police, professors, politicians, the press, everyone except for the people, I suppose, that this Bild magazine is so pro-migrant. They're even more pro-migrant than the government, and they really are engaging in gorgeous propaganda. You've got to call it propaganda. That beautiful picture of the young girl crawling under the barbed wire with her your beautiful hair with little, I mean, just such a cute kid, and who wouldn't want to rescue that little girl? Of course, that's not the true face of Muslim migration in Europe, which is more than 75% male. In Hungary, it's 83% male. It's all single young military-aged men. Even the choice of that beautiful girl crawling under the barbed wire is misleading, of course. It's just open borders. I stand with Bild in their right to be free speech and their right to be propagandists, frankly. But it's incredible that the only media that's standing up to the government is the one that's even more pro-migrant. Isn't that funny? Where are the magazines and newspapers, Simon, that want fewer migrants standing up to Angela Merkel? It's weird that the only defiant media is the one who says, we want even more than you do.
Well, you're going to have to look very, very hard in the German media, Ezra. Anyone who's prepared to take up the cudgels and pick a fight with Angela Merkel on the matter of migration. And it's to their great shame that they don't possess a collective backbone and they're prepared to do it. And you nailed it there when you said a magazine editor has a fight with the government because Angela Merkel wants now, after 12 months, actually wants less migrants, not more. And therefore, this attack dog of Angela Merkel's from the Christian Democratic Union is going after them. And Angela Merkel likes to think she runs Europe, she controls Europe, she invited everyone in. Now she's backpedaling, and now she wants a compliant media to go with her. I hope they don't, and maybe this might be the start of something good. The German media disgraced itself over its coverage of the Cologne sexual assaults and the mass horror that went on then over New Year's Eve. Here in London, Breitbart London, we covered it. We drove the agenda. Rebel TV picked it up. It's got a lot further to go, but I think it's a good thing to see the media standing up and getting some backbone, because without that, it's a pretty slippery slope that we'll all be heading down.
Yeah. Well, listen, London is one of the great capitals of freedom of speech. It's in so many ways, It's the mother city of free speech. John Milton's Areopagitica, perhaps the greatest defense of free speech ever written. London is a free speech city, even if there are some erosions to that in recent years. Is there any city or country in continental Europe, Simon, that has a free speech tradition like the UK, like North America, where people say, well, if there's a media monoculture, we're going to smash it being contrarian? We regard ourselves here at The Rebel as free speechers and contrarians and independent-minded people. I know you do too at Breitbart, both in America and the UK. Is there any analog, anyone like us on the continent?
I can't see anyone doing it, Ezra. And let's face it, if you want to have a vigorous democracy, you've got to have a free, open and vigorous media. I'm living here in London, and you can go to Speaker's Corner where 250 years ago, people could get up and say what was regarded as most subversive things. But, and there's the but, it was tolerated. And this is where the whole concept of free speech started. You do get it here in the UK, although there's a pretty monochrome media, I must say. They're all mimicking each other. Looking across Europe, you don't really see the same vigorous attempt to take on the government that you'll see in the UK, that you'll see in North America, in Canada and the US. I think it's important, and we need that, because a vigorous democracy needs freedom of speech. It needs brave people who are strong enough to stand up to a government and not be prepared to be cowed by the consequences. I think that's where Rebel TV does a good job. I like to think we do that at Breitbart in the UK and in the US, and let's more strength and let's keep doing it.
Right on, Simon Kent. Those are great words of encouragement to us. Thank you. We regard Breitbart.com as one of our role models. The fact that you started in the States and have expanded into Europe is very encouraging. Maybe you guys will fly the flag in some of these countries in Europe that need it so badly. We'll try our best too. Simon Kent, managing editor, Breitbart.com. Great to see you again. Thanks, my friend.
Thank you.
Right on. Stay with us. After these words, your viewer feedback.
So open-minded that the brains have fallen out.
What's the point that you're making?
The point that I'm making is that if you're going to propose a massive overhaul to the way the economy is developed in terms of carbon tax, cap and trade, other forms like that, it helps to have some science that is in fact settled.
We've heard you loud and clear. You can't get enough Canadian conservative news and opinion. Why not check out our blog? It's all your favorite conservative bloggers together on a page called The Megaphone. Go to TheRebel.media/TheMegaphone or click on the Megaphone menu from our main page to check it out.
Welcome back to the show. My favorite part is your viewer feedback. Larry writes, thank you for your email. I never heard of your paper, not really a paper, until yesterday, but when I had seen what Notley was trying to do, I looked it up and read the articles. I was impressed, and although I am retired, I made a donation in support of things called freedom of speech. I wonder how long it will be before her ilk and Trudum and Wynne try and shut up all the negative comments. Keep up the good work. Regards, Larry. Hi, Larry. Thank you very much. Well, you've just described something called the Streisand effect. You know what I'm talking about? Remember Barbara Streisand? Well, she didn't like the fact that someone snapped this photograph of her beautiful Malibu, California home and published it on the internet. Not to show how rich her house was, but actually as part of a larger project about coastal erosion. Seriously, there was thousands of pictures of the coast, but Streisand didn't want her picture to be public. Now, until that point, literally 6 people had downloaded the picture from the internet, 2 of whom were her lawyers. But once Barbara Streisand sued that website, people became curious, and the photo was downloaded 420,000 times in 1 month. You see that paradox? When you try and ban something, people are naturally curious, and they want to learn what all the fuss is about. Or they want to show that they're independent or defiant and do what you can't say they can't do. So Barbara Streisand made her home famous when she was trying to keep it private. Rachel Notley was trying to kill our little news network, but she actually introduced many Canadians to us for the first time who had never heard of us, like you, Larry. Someone named Silver Sasquatch, that was my nickname in high school, writes, "I'm glad you got kicked out of the legislature after your book came out. It exposed the NDP even more, and you guys made them blink. Good." You're talking about Sheila Gunn Reid's book called The Destroyers. I'm glad, well, actually, I'm not glad we were kicked out, you know? And here's my proof. As you saw, when we were kicked out, we didn't make a fuss about it. We sent a calm, professional lawyer's letter to the Premier's office asking them just to assure us it wouldn't happen anymore. Low key, like grown-ups. We gave them a week to think about it. They wrote back going nuclear, saying we were banned and anyone connected to us was banned. So that's when we went public. I really would rather report on the news than make the news, but hey, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And on Tuesday, when this hit the fan, we had 294,000 page views of our little website. The NDP plan to censor us backfired Barbra Streisand style. Ron writes, "Where was Dizzy Levant when Harper shut down the media? What a bombastic, big mouth ass." That's my other high school nickname. Well, look, here's that same old liberal fantasy grievance myth. We heard it yesterday from Susan Delacourt, saying it again now. Can you please show me one example in 9.5 years of Stephen Harper being prime minister where he had armed security kick out a reporter from public property, where sheriffs put any reporters on, quote, a no-go list, where Harper had the Department of Justice literally confirm a blacklist on official government stationery? Sorry, Stephen Harper may have been rude to journalists or not answered their questions, but that is not censoring them or restricting their ability to do their work. Look, I know lefties wish that Stephen Harper was the tyrant and Rachel Notley was the freedom-loving liberal, but as Notley just proved, it's the opposite. Well, that's our show for today. It's been incredible. I mean, it was the 1-year anniversary of the show, and Rachel Notley thought she would do a death blow to us. In fact, it breathed new life into us by bringing us to the attention of more people. But we will continue to report the news as we always do, giving you the other side of the story, whether you're in Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, or as anywhere around the world. Keep watching if you want our side of things. Until tomorrow, I'll say, keep fighting for freedom. Good night.